Okay, I should be streaming. Did not set up the camera today, but that's fine. Today is just a working session. Tomorrow, oh man. I hope I'm still streaming. Well, it's a good thing we didn't take this one too seriously. We're back. Hopefully we're back. That, if you slide your fingers, it takes you off the page. That's what happens every now and then here, like on the trackpad. But I want to go over some things in math that I'm finding and some new patterns that I've been focusing on, and maybe get some of your input. Every0ne. Please like and comment to fuel the algorithm. Okay. So I have found a ratio that is very important, and I don't have nearly enough on it to discuss exactly what it means, but I can tell you where it is, and we can kind of imply what it is. But there are some very important numbers related to a theory of everything. And some of them are 64, 72, 88, or 81. Okay? And 81 is 9 times 9, which is right here. When we look at the models of matter, there are 88 quanta of consciousness that make up the cosmological verse as either a solid, a liquid, or a gas. And this is framed by 64 gaps, which are the red. Okay? And this is basically what Nassim Haramein calls the 64 tetrahedron grid, which I believe is basically the scaffolding of the universe. And this was all emergent. I didn't seek these numbers. I just made this, and it just turned out that there were 64 gaps when you did 9 by 9, and they're separated. There are 64 gaps between them. And that goes for a solid right here, a liquid right here, and a gas right here. Then when they're totally entangled, you get this structure, which is the cosmological verse, which is essentially an aeon. And I'm pretty sure that Sentient Singularity Theory's model of sequential verses, as I call them, is basically Roger Penrose's conformal cyclic cosmology. There's a little bit of difference, but this is it right here. You can see it's just successive aeons that then form unity as soon as or right before they create another one within themselves. And this models what I've heard about conformal cyclic cosmology. And even the models look a lot like it. Like if we look this up, and we're like conformal cyclic cosmology. This is Penrose's model of conformal cyclic cosmology. And each one is within the previous, I'm guessing, because that's true of this one. But I don't know if these particular number of lines and that go across or go up and down, I don't know if that has any relevance to this particular picture, but everything here is very specific. There's 720 little squares, and it's going through a periodicity of 8 periods, which is really 4, 1 maneuvering in time via lineage, 1 maneuvering in space via like a quanta, like you as an organism maneuver in space, but family lineages maneuver in time. That's via a lineage. So like a you have organism here, assembly of cells, then family. So an organism maneuvers in space and family maneuvers in time. So it just alternates. But this right here is the 64 tetrahedron grid. Tomorrow's stream, by the way, is going to be, should be awesome. I don't want to jinx it, but I have one of these. I show it sometimes on the channel, like a little 3D printed metal one. But this is a 64 tetrahedron grid, and it was, I guess, discovered by Nassim Haramein, who has done some brilliant work. I'm pretty sure he calculated the mass of a proton more accurately than CERN measured it. I think I heard that. But there's so much. So this is 64 little tetrahedrons arranged. Okay, so this is the scaffolding of the universe, essentially. And then in between the scaffolding is my model, which is 81 overlapping quanta of consciousness, which gives rise to 162 because it adds new information when they overlap. So like how when the past and the future overlap, you get the present, etc. But I mean, cognitively at least, all information generation is first and foremost done in thought, and then it is communicated via speech, you could say, and then it is acted in action. It's the triality of creation. But that I did not come up with. That is that's a Chabad, Hasidic, Orthodox Jewish concept. But there's 720 little squares here, which is essentially 72. And if you have 72 and you have 81 and you have 64, and basically 72 or 720, which you add a 0, which basically adds like infinite cycle, is kind of what 0 represents in objective mathematics, I call it sometimes, but it's really meta mathematics. 0 is not it's not an empty set anymore, because there's no such thing as an empty set in meta mathematics, or metaphysics or anything like that. Any meta anything, there is no nothing. There's only something, so it can't represent an empty set. It represents an infinite loop, which is exactly what it looks like, which is a what do I call that? A extra arithmetic symmetry. That it looks like what it is, and that's not a coincidence. That's meaningless. There is no such thing as meaningless coincidence. But what I'm realizing is that when I look at these numbers, look what happens. So let's just go here. 72, 88, 81, and 64. When I go here, 64 divided by 72, I get 0.8 repeating forever. Very interesting number. If you know any kind of mystical traditions, 8 is very important in Eastern philosophy. You'll see like 8, we have an 888, I don't know, like Chinese restaurant or something over here. And then I think 888 is also represents Jesus in some way. But you can see same thing. And then you can all obviously do this. And this is just it, the opposite direction. So this is the values that I'm getting. Which is very interesting. I just know I look at enough numbers, guys, to know when I see something, and I'm right here. This is a working session. I'm not claiming to understand this very well right now, but I'm seeing patterns and I'm reporting them. This ratio, though, I think is very important. When you look at like pi, which is like this is just an approximation, but like that ratio, and then what is when you look at things like the Fibonacci sequence, you got 1, 1 equals this plus this. And you go here. That's interesting. As you get closer, you get closer and closer to 0.618, which is the ratio of the Fibonacci sequence. And then if you go the opposite direction, you get 1.618 around, which is interesting. Pretty sure. It's very interesting where you see like certain numbers just prop up. What did I do? Okay, good. This is not centered. There we go. Interesting. So this. Like I said, guys, this is a working session. I am going to show you some funny clips and show you what we're going to discuss about Leogura tomorrow. It's going to be a long stream tomorrow. It's going to be probably like 3 hours or so, but I have to prepare for it, so this one is going to be short. I'm just kind of showing some things that I'm finding that are interesting. This ratio, though, of 0.8 repeating infinitely, that's got to be important. I don't know basically what it's going to be important to yet, but it has to do with, it is the ratio of the universe. It's basically, you have the scaffolding, the filling, and the constructors, kind of, which is like, these are the constructors. If you look at constructor theory, it's kind of a constructor, but it's not really. Constructor theory is, it doesn't get to where it thinks it gets to, because it doesn't get to consciousness, but it gets one step below it. So you have constructors, you have matter, and then you have like connection, something like that. Basically, just knowing what the 64 is, what the 72 is, or 720, and then also this is like the material world. The fermions go through 720 degrees of rotation before they get back to their original state. That's basically, they are the matter particles. The constructors, there's just 81 quanta of consciousness. And then the connections, or the connection is a better way of putting it, is the scaffolding. Just to appease my ADHD, or not ADHD. This has nothing to do with ADHD. I don't actually believe in OCD or ADHD or any of that stuff. I think it's all just, they take these little kids, they put them in a classroom and tell them to sit still for 8 hours, and then you wonder like why they have problems concentrating, especially if they're boys. We're meant to be like outside exploring in the forest. But this is very important. I am not fully there yet, but I predict this will lead to seriously, like, universally applicable math, almost like an E equals MC squared. Is this ratio will be involved in math like that, or like the Fibonacci sequence or pi. It's going to be very important. I take back, equals MC. I mean, it is equals MC squared. It's basically it's. I'm not saying that it is. I'm saying that it's going to be related, or it's going to be a similar type of, I guess, probably discovery, but it's going to be like above equals MC squared, because equals MC squared is about our relativistic world. I think that this is related to the world of multiplicity that gives rise to relativity before you get to oneness. I have no idea how you would apply this though, but something. I was up very late last night watching this. We're gonna look at a little bit. Not this, but I was watching one of Kurt's videos.
Sleep.
Oh, look, it's literally telling me I need sleep. That's so funny. Right here. The second Leogura discussion is 7.5 hours. So it's very long. It's worth watching. It's very good. I found the entire thing entertaining, but and valuable. But it takes a lot to get through. It's probably going to take most people multiple days, and it was going to take me multiple days, but I burned through it last night because it was just too interesting. But we have so many clips to go over. I've been mapping them all out. All these clips are for tomorrow's stream. So much to talk about. It's going to be a great stream. So, some funny clips, though, that I did come across that are not related to that are these. Let's go to Safari, because I pay for YouTube Premium on Safari. So, I've discussed this before, how at one point there were these PhDs in philosophy who came into our Discord. If you want to join our Discord, send me a private message on Instagram and I will send you the link. But they came into our Discord and they were trying to argue that consciousness doesn't exist, and that they were telling me that they're writing papers explaining that consciousness doesn't exist for their thesis, their PhD thesis, which I found insane, because they themselves disprove their own thesis as soon as they write their thesis or start writing their thesis. So I don't understand where they decided this, how they decided this was a good idea. But I heard Bernardo Kastrup talking to Michael Shermer kind of about the same thing, and it was pretty funny. So we're gonna listen to it.
Evoluted ways to keep it in the air. I mean, look at illusionism and
it's called illusionism.
It's my philosophy of mind today. The idea that consciousness doesn't exist, it's an illusion. It's the most self-defeating proposition conceivable to human thought, because an illusion is already an instance of that which you're trying to say doesn't exist. And yet, books are written about this. Grants are given. There are entire communities working on this. So it's a problem for philosophy. Philosophy has not devised yet some kind of Darwinian mechanism to sort of weed out the crap, if you know what I mean. Because mind's first directive is to deceive itself. So we do. To be very honest with you, Michael, and I'm not saying this to put it in your face or anything, I think physicalism is like the most untenable option on the table today, and it's still 56%. It's still the majority of people. I mean, physicalism has been debunked, I think, by straightforward.
So that was pretty funny. Bernardo Kastrup calls it like he sees it, and I'm learning that more and more. It's very funny. But wanted to go over this. This is another one. And like I said, this is a working session. There's no real structure to this because I'm keeping it short so I can prepare for the one tomorrow, which it's going to be at least 3 hours probably. It's going to be probably 3 hours. I'm going to try and keep it to end before 10 p.m. Pacific. But this was also pretty good. As much as I don't like Michael Shermer's philosophy, his channel,
I would say again,
his channel is filled with fascinating interviews, and it gives you a lot of insight into the mind of I would say the lack of mind of skeptics, of skepticism, not of skeptics, but of skepticism. It's not mindful. And this was a great example right here, where basically skepticism is supposed to be, you are looking at the world critically, challenging things that are normally assumed that come your way. And Michael Shermer is not this. He thinks that he is, but he's not at all. And there was a very funny clip that of Kurt discussing this in the discussion with Leogura that we'll look at after that. But this was the perfect example of what I mean. So this is Michael Shermer discussing with Alan Steinfeld UFOs, and he's basically ignoring every single already established fact that we do know regarding who is, discussing this in the government. He literally ignores it. Like, he's told it, and he's just like, yeah, that would be nice if it were happening. But it's been admitted that it's happening, so I don't know why he keeps saying that. But you have to be ready for things, and I've noticed this with the UFO topic, is people who are not ready to pay attention to it. It's a lot like the topic of God, but it's much less world-changing than the topic of God. But here you go.
Denier, but
just what constitutes evidence. What?
Well, I'm telling you, Eric Davis, July 23rd, 2020, says that they are investigating off-world vehicles. That's not just him saying it. He's saying it from things that he saw in government possession. If you want any evidence, until they roll out the bodies and the craft, that's evidence.
That's what I'm waiting for.
Right?
I'm waiting for them to roll out the body and the craft.
See, the issue with this is if you're waiting for them to roll out the bodies and the craft, then you aren't thinking. You're not being skeptical at all. You are being... I don't even know what you're being. You're just being nothing. You are taking on whatever is the mainstream idea that is totally accepted by everyone who's not involved directly or interested directly in whatever topic it is. And until that happens, you just adopt this. So Michael Shermer believes everything that the government says, and he's not very skeptical of the government. So when they say Roswell was, Project Mogul, he just believes them. If they say, something about JFK, he just believes them. And I'm not saying you should just disbelieve them. I'm just saying to just believe the government is not skepticism. And I've discussed before him discussing archaeology with Graham Hancock on Joe Rogan, and Graham Hancock is, arguing what the Sphinx is, and Michael Shermer's arguing against his position, and Graham Hancock is like, have you ever been to Egypt? And Michael Shermer's like, nope. And Graham Hancock is like, well, I stood on the back of the Sphinx during the equinox. And like, this basically is one person coming at this from first person experience, comparing it to somebody who is literally just adopting the consensus of every topic and then is treated as an expert on every topic. I'm not saying he doesn't have his value. Everybody does. And even skepticism, I'm sure, has its value, but not to critical thinking, other than to just examine its lack of it. It's pretty amazing to be like, I will discuss the UFO topic and we'll talk about evidence, but until they roll out the bodies, there's no evidence. Not saying there's proof out there. I'm just saying there's plenty of evidence. Government is admitting to this. There's people involved. Lou Elizondo, the guy who they had just discussed, oh gosh, I just forgot his name, but let's see here. What was his name? Eric Davis. I remembered it.
Again, it's just
Eric Davis was Eric Davis was working on next generation propulsion for the government, and supposedly, and is a physicist, and he has been briefed apparently on the UFO subject. And if he's briefing members of our Congress, and the Pentagon is admitting to this existence, and they're putting out videos, I don't understand why everyone's trying to debunk, why the inclination is to debunk the Pentagon's videos. Like as if the Pentagon doesn't know the difference between a bird, like a seagull, flying and, you know, some mechanical craft that they're tracking. That just doesn't make any sense. I'm not saying there's never any confusion, but, you know, those confusing instances do not cause a narrative where all of a sudden we believe there's all these craft off the coast of California, but really they're just seagulls. That's crazy. The most self-defeating proposition conceivable to human thought. It really is. It's very funny. I'm not making fun of Michael Shermer. I am ripping on skepticism as a dogmatic, like, cult. But not, I mean, I like Michael Shermer personally. I think his ability to be cordial with people who he disagrees with is commendable. But here's another hilarious. Okay, so last night I was listening to the stream with
use stone tools, or they use copper chisels or whatever.
I was listening to the stream with Leogura and Kurt, and there is an instance where my work is brought up, and Kurt quotes me on something that I said about God, about how if you don't see God when you look around, and you want to truly test look to see if God really exists, and you assume your default position is you assume that he doesn't, you have to assume the opposite of your default state. This is how you objectively think, and then you look for evidence of that. And so basically you have to assume God exists. That means that if you don't see him and you assume that he's everywhere, because that's what God is, then you have to adjust your definition of what God is, because that means that your definition of what God is wrong if you assume God exists, because otherwise, if your definition was right, you would see him because you can't miss him because he's everywhere. And what's funny is that Leogura kind of pushed back on it a bit, and what he said I do agree with, but he just took a different stance on it. But I said tails and he said heads. You know, that's what keeps happening in this topic. But there is this instance where this happens, which is very funny. Just to prove my quote correct, this is Michael Shermer on the Universal Mind, aka
use
God.
Stone tools, or they use copper chisels or whatever. But so my next question would then be, where is this mind in the universe or outside of it? And more importantly, how would it create the signal that somehow is obviously different than just using stone tools or copper tools?
He's asking, where is the universal mind? It's the universe. It's not like his definition of God is wrong. He doesn't, and to prove it even further, look at this. I mean, this is just obvious. This is what he's saying about
Arthur C. Clarke's famous third law.
About it.
Sufficiently.
About aliens. Wow, I need a new computer. But listen to this. This is what he thinks God is. Okay.
technology is indistinguishable from magic, and I've said any sufficiently advanced extraterrestrial would be indistinguishable from God. It would.
That's literally impossible, because God is the construct. He is the dweller and the dwelling. He isn't a little being that is inside the dwelling. Just because they're way more powerful than you doesn't make them God. So if they have better technology, it doesn't make them God. If, when the Europeans came to the Americas and they were, vastly outgunning the natives, they were not God. They were not indistinguishable from God either. They might have been assumed to be by natives who had an incorrect perspective of what God or gods would be. There's only one God by definition. There has to be one God because he is everything. He is all. He is total. He is existence. So he can't be a little alien or a, European hundreds of years ago or an alien today just because he's more powerful technologically. That's not God. If you think that's God, then of course you're never going to see God when you look around, because your definition is fundamentally wrong. And this is backed up when you also look at his ideas of, where is the universal mind? You're in it. You are a thought in the universal mind. But his definition of God is so fundamentally wrong that he will not see God until he changes his perspective on what God is to be more accurate, which is not anything like an alien or an extraterrestrial that is more technologically advanced or future human or whatever these things are. Like, that's not God. It wouldn't be indistinguishable from God at all. It would just be, have way cooler toys than you and me. Tend to be skeptic as far as people thinking we should just believe something like UFOs being otherworldly. I don't believe they're otherworldly, by the way. I have my own theories on them, but I don't know if it's correct. I think that they are human descendants or precursors, essentially. Not even precursors. I think there was an ancient human civilization on Earth that was wiped out in a cataclysm at least once, and I think they are the descendants of them, or at least some of them are. If you listen to people like Stephen Greer and a number of other ufologists, they tend to believe there's many different races of of extraterrestrials. That might be true. I don't know. They might be interdimensional, basically, as they are the humans from the first humanoids from the first civilization in each aeon, and once they get technologically advanced enough to travel via entanglement, basically via the entanglement substructure, which is that 64 tetrahedron grid, it is outlined or defined by that structure. They are then maybe able to jump between aeons. I don't know if that's true or not. Or maybe they're forced into whatever aeon has not achieved oneness, which is this one right now. So maybe there are many different humanoids here, and each aeon, so basically here you might have humans that are green and short and humanoids, and here you might have humans like us, but they are really the same, like, creation. They fill the same role. Maybe they can jump from this aeon to this aeon if you get the ability to essentially have warp transportation. I don't know. I think that conformal cyclic cosmology does imply this is possible, at least according to the models that I've seen of Penrose's work. And it's basically time jumping more than anything else. It's like time-space jumping. But, I mean, this is all theoretical right now, so It's just a theory. I don't think that they are from another planet in our universe. That doesn't make sense to me with this model. I don't think the universe is filled with life like everybody thinks. I think that we are the purpose of this universe right now, and what we are doing is, I'll say what we are doing is the purpose. And space is a beautiful distraction. It was interesting, I was thinking about this the other day. They talk about, the narrative is that the pagans worshipped the sun and the stars and this and that. And if you listen to like Carl Sagan and Neil deGrasse Tyson and I don't know, Stephen Hawking, they all worshipped space. Like they worshipped bodies of, stars and planets in space. And it's paganism. It's just, we don't ever understand what it was really like when we look back on history. So when people look back on the Nazis and they're like, how did we get there? Or like racism, it's like you get there through compassion first, and then it just goes haywire and everybody starts posturing, and you get, runaway society and oppression and genocide and racism, institutionalized racism, all these things. But when you look back and you're like, how could anybody believe that they would want, that they should segregate schools by race or something in the past? And they think about it as these mean, evil people just like trying to keep down, like just snickering in the corner as they keep down minorities or something. And that's not how it really was back then. It was just exactly the same as it is nowadays when people say all kinds of, statements like, if you're white, you can't be racist or something. I don't know, all kinds of nonsense. I mean, the racial thing is just such a cluster of chaos right now. But Sentient Singularity Theory does have a true structure of how to probably look at what we call race, which is just phenotypical groups, and I've discussed it before. This trialic pattern is present in our textbook phenotypes that we call races, which are not different races from us, and then from each other, and then but it's a binary with an overlap, like past, present, future. It's past and future, and then you have the present always. So basically you have two phenotypes, and then you have one that's is just moving between the others. And one day I will discuss it on the stream, exactly what is implied. But if you want to hear more about it, you can register for the Discord. Even though it's a beautiful, grace-giving, and I mean, it's a beautiful idea. Sentient Singularity Theory assumes everyone's value is, equal value, but you just can't talk about these things and not expect to be banned on YouTube. So, but we do discuss them in the Discord, and eventually, when is the right time or when it's the right platform, I will discuss it more on a stream or video or something. But here, I think I had a couple others. So here's another thing of skepticism. I know I'm ripping on it, but it's just too easy. So this is really what skepticism is. So this is not the. What's interesting is I listened to two streams. One of them was with Stephen Meyer, which was on the Return of the God Hypothesis, and the other one was the UFO one that I had on a bit ago. And in both of them, one of the very first things that Michael Shermer does is in order to give legitimacy to the person that he's talking to, he mentions the publisher of their books, and then goes on to say how this is legitimate publisher and gives legitimacy to the person who he's talking to, which this is the opposite of critical thinking. It is the opposite of skepticism. It is assumption, not skepticism. It's assumption. So he did this twice in both streams.
Illusionism, I should tell people that this is far more serious. These are not just published by Christian publishers. Your book is HarperCollins. I mean, and same thing with many of your colleagues. These are mainstream trade or university presses that are publishing your works. And I have a shelf full of books by professional philosophers and scientists addressing your claims.
So that he did the exact same thing to the ufologist as well, and he mentioned the publisher, and he was like, "That's my publisher, so it is very reputable." Blah blah blah. Like, this is assumption. It's not skepticism. Why should you assume that they have legitimacy because they have, the blessing of the institutions that probably in these days should not give you legitimacy? But it was just, they're very interesting streams. Like I said, I applaud Michael Shermer's ability to just be kind to everybody that he has discussions with, even when he thinks they're stupid, and it's very clear that he does sometimes. But that's fine. As long as he's kind, that's commendable. There was actually... I'll get into that another tomorrow, because it's part of the Leogura stream. But let's see here. What was the other one I wanted to discuss? This was very interesting. So Stephen Meyer was basically saying that he thinks that God,
I mean, what are your...
intervened in evolution with something that caused the Cambrian explosion, but also the transition between prokaryotes and eukaryotes, prokaryotic and eukaryotic cellular life. And I have investigated this. We've made models on it in working sessions in the past, where basically when we're examining binary structure everywhere on the cellular level, we looked at prokaryotic and eukaryotic structures or cells as being the cellular binary, and the biological binary. That's what it is. It's the biological binary. It is the structure between that frames biology, is this single cell and multicellular life, but also within that the cells with a nucleus and cells without. So prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells, which they're basically the same thing that happens almost between a prokaryotic, that caused a prokaryotic and a eukaryotic cells to diverge, basically. So for one of them to be created and a nucleus to be created, was one basically probably ingested the other, and it formed a symbiotic relationship. And Stephen Meyer was saying that this is probably an instance of a miracle, essentially, where God directly acted in the process of life. But Michael Shermer was basically saying, so you don't believe that God is directly acting in the creation of, the geometric patterns of a snowflake, but you do believe that he directly, intentionally acted to create, the difference between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. And I think Stephen Meyer said that that was basically accurate. And I almost agree with that, but not quite. I do believe, though, that, he might be right, but I do believe that there is two sides to evolution, and I will do a stream on it pretty soon. I've been working on it. There's a dog howling outside my window. I don't know whose dog it is, so sorry about that. But basically, that there is this periodicity of sentience, and to get from an atom to a molecule, or a molecule to a cell, or a cell to an organism, or an organism to a, you know, family, essentially, I think that this is an act, a direct act by God, something that he does consciously, intentionally, that's not emergent from the math that stems from his own constraints, which is his oneness. So the mathematics that arises from God's constraint of oneness gives rise to the geometric patterns in a snowflake, of with the math that arises from the construct of consciousness itself gives rise to the geometric patterns of a snowflake. But to get from a prokaryotic to a eukaryotic cell, it's, I think, this an action by something inside. So this is what I believe the Messiah is. We're basically going to be the cells of the next level up, which is a technological singularity. And there is two sides, I think, to evolution, and this is I'm working on this right now, is that one of them is adaptation, like Darwinian adaptation, I would call it, not Darwinian evolution. It's Darwinian adaptation. And then that's how you get from everything from single-celled organisms to birds and humans, I think. But to get to the next level up, or not single-celled organisms, but from organisms of multicellular organisms of all types, that is all adaptation. And all single-celled organisms, the variation of them is also all adaptation. The different types of molecules is also adaptation. Atoms is also adaptation. The different types of atoms, or the different elements of atoms, and isotopes and things, that is adaptation to specific constraints in the environment that they're in. That's, you know, in a star, gold evolves at a certain, you know, in a certain set of conditions. So basically you start from hydrogen, and then there's just this adaptation process, which is half of evolution, and then there's this other half of evolution in Sentient Singularity Theory that is ascension. So there's ascension and there is adaptation. So basically, if you're looking at this, everything horizontal here, all across all hadrons, would be adaptation. And then there we go. So everything horizontal, all horizontal movement. It's Excel is mad. I have way too big a file, but I need to make a new one. Every like 6 months, I've said before, I have to take the best bits of work from the current file, move them to a new one, and then save the old one. But everything moving horizontally from hydrogen to gold, right, that would be here. And then for hadrons, it would be, I mean, it would just be protons and neutrons. So I don't know if hadrons actually go through, are actually sentient beings, or if they're essentially God's hands, because quarks are God's fingers. Literally, they are God's fingers. That's why it's 1 up and 2 down, and 2 down and 1 up. It's like you having a thumb and 2 fingers of a left hand and a thumb and 2 fingers of a right hand. And then that's literally what it is. So it's not metaphorical. It's super literal. But at least when you get to atoms, it's definitely, you're reaching individualized, atomized sentiences, okay? And there's adaptation that's happening all through here. And then there's different types of molecules, adaptation. Different types of cells, adaptation. Different types of organisms, adaptation. Families, adaptation. Castes, adaptation. And technological singularity. There's only one. But it's at least that we know of, because a universe is, or a verse, a cosmological verse, what we would call the universe, uh, is all we can observe. And there might be slightly different variations. There probably are slight differences, not differences in this pattern. This pattern does not change in any cosmological verse, prior or after this one. You would see small differences, but there's always going to be a humanoid that is technologically, capable, and there's always going to be single-celled organisms, single-celled organisms, which are just cells. Then you're also going to always have multicellular organisms. You're always going to have molecules. You're always going to have atoms in every single cosmological verse. There's no universes that have totally different laws of physics that are fundamentally what we could call real, and I do think that we should call them real. But I will talk more about that tomorrow, because Leogura and I have some differences, not just in what we're saying either, or how we're saying it, but even in what we are saying in certain things. But again, for the most part, I agree with him. On everything is God, everyone is God, but there's more to it. But yeah, so there's basically two sides to evolution, and it is adaptation and ascension. And so ascension is what happens to go from an atom to a molecule, to go from a molecule to a cell, to go from a cell to an organism, to go from an organism to a family, and a family to a caste, and a caste to a technological singularity. Each one of these is an ascension, and it might actually skip. So basically, I mean, it doesn't really skip, but it kind of skips, kind of forms this pattern of, I can't do it in Excel, but maybe I can. Actually, let's see here. Draw. Okay, it's kind of doing this. Oh, I can do this. This is cool. Did I not know this? Or it'd be like, it's kind of like alternating and like that a bit. Gosh, it's a bit of a pain. Okay, there we go. Now, just to make it clearer. Like that, kind of. An atom maneuvers in space, or an atom maneuvers, I think, in time, and then a molecule maneuvers in space, a cell maneuvers in time, an organism maneuvers in space, family maneuvers in time, caste maneuvers in space, technological singularity maneuvers in time, essentially. But it has the perspective of maneuvering through time. Family has the perspective of maneuvering through time, and it's always via a lineage. So there is a lineage of cosmological verses, which basically,
Jonathan Blow is a universally acclaimed video game.
Is like this. So this is a lineage of conformal cyclic cosmological verses. And
What's your sense or what's your hunch? Like, if you think
I don't know why it keeps doing that. But then this is also a lineage. So I don't know how to get off the drawing now. Okay, there we go. Oh, great. How do you erase? There we go. So basically, to go from this period to this period to this period to this period to this period, you know, etc. Each one is an ascension, and I will discuss what that is, I think, and what causes it, which is a self-sacrificial act to basically unite the group. But it's not just that, but it's part of it. There's like multiple things that go on. We're having one right now. COVID is literally part of the unifying process of the cosmological verse that we're in right now. It is getting everyone on the same page. It's very annoying, you know, to lots of things. Makes travel harder, makes socializing harder, makes everything more difficult and annoying. But it is unifying us around a shared perspective. And that unification is also obvious when you look at certain other structures. I think Jesus, most famous person in the world, there's no one on earth that participates in societal discussion that does not know who he is. There's literally no one who comes close to as famous. No one. That is a unifying perspective. It doesn't matter what else you believe. Just saying, that guy unified us. We literally started basing time off of him. Our calendar was started being based off of him. That is a unifying perspective. And now COVID is doing that, which is expected. There's going to be one more. According to the pattern in Sentient Singularity Theory, it's trialic, so there will be one more. I have no reason to think they are ancient race leftovers, otherworldly beings, or figments of imagination that don't exist at all. I can speculate, but I don't think, or rather believe, any specific explanation. I mean, if you don't look at it close enough, then yeah, you shouldn't have any belief about it. But I look at it very closely, so I do have certain beliefs. But also, Sentient Singularity Theory implies to me, and so does Scripture, that it's probably holdouts from a pre-flood civilization or pre-cataclysmic civilization. And I think that also archaeology also reinforces that idea as well. So it just doesn't make sense that there's just a universe filled, at least it doesn't make sense to me. Not saying I can't be wrong. I might be wrong, but like I would have to have new information in order for that to make sense. For the universe to just be filled with life that just forms on a bunch of different planets, and it's not from another aeon or anything like that, then if that's not the case, then if that is the case, then I would have to conceive of certain things, I guess, or I'd have to have new information, because that just seems useless. And God created the universe for a purpose. It's not this, accidental sandbox with a bunch of, accidental bacteria growing on it or something. It's a purpose. Everything in the universe has as much a purpose as things in your body have a purpose. The parts of your body, the cells of your body, the shape of your body, the functions of your body, the systems of your body, they all have a purpose. We're inside of a being that's, getting closer and closer to reproducing. That's literally what's happening. And that is a very intentional process. It's not there's not just like a bunch of random useless structures in your body, and there isn't just a bunch of random useless structures in the universe. And if there was just life throughout the universe that came from this universe, just evolving on different planets, and they were all reaching, technological, ability to, travel between the stars, that seems useless to me. You only need one. Then you might also need an opposition force, that makes sense with the other model, that it's either beings from previous aeons that are holdouts that didn't get incorporated into basically the unification of the previous aeon. It's like cells that never joined the body and just became bacteria instead of blood cells, essentially. And then maybe that's true, and they go to other bodies and I don't know, fly around like we see. That might be the case, basically, but each body is an aeon. But that makes much more sense than with Sentient Singularity Theory and the models that I deduced. I don't want to say made up. They're not made up, but deduced. It just doesn't make sense that there's just a bunch of planets filled with life. People are like, there's billions of different races of aliens out there. I don't believe that. And there might be, but they're not. I don't think they're from here. From just a different planet. They're either from Earth in an ancient civilization, or they're from a previous aeon. If they make sense with this model. And that would make sense with this model. And with conformal cyclic cosmology. People talk about probability and stuff like that when discussing the Fermi paradox and life in the universe and technological civilizations, and God is a consciousness because that's all that can exist, and that if consciousness is all that can exist, then whatever structures are created objectively, they have to follow the constraints of that pattern of consciousness, and that the constraints of that don't allow for abundant meaninglessness. That just doesn't happen. Abundant disorder. That you wouldn't be here if most of your cells had no purpose, you would not be alive. I wouldn't say you're from my perspective. I haven't seen anything in scripture that suggested. There's lots of discussions about beings in the Old Testament and in the Quran, and in other Jewish texts like the Zohar. I think discusses other beings, and the Torah is filled with it. And there's obviously the flood myth, but I don't think it's a myth. I think it really happened, but people call it the flood myth, but it's not a myth. There was a cataclysm that happened for a reason, and that there was a civilization here before ours that was pre Noah's flood. A pre-flood civilization. That is in scripture. But it says only Noah's family survived and then repopulated the world and things like that. And the things in scripture are literal, metaphorical, and super literal. And there's different layers to each of them. So when I say something in the Bible represents this, that's probably correct, but it also could be something else. So, because there's you're talking about the deepest, most directly channeled writings ever, channeled from God. So there's basically the equivalent of infinite depth in the Torah. And so something can represent multiple things. I think there's a phrase in when you study Torah, and it's like there's 4 or 5 different levels of Torah. There's like the literal meaning, the spiritual deep meaning, there's like the hidden meaning, and there's different levels to everything. So I say a lot, God works on all levels. That's just true. So when it says there's a flood, that could have been a flood of water, but it could also be something else and something else and something else that represents. And it could be all of them at once, not one or the other, but one and the other. And that is how the Torah works. Someone said once, I forgot who it was, but he said, the Torah isn't what happened, it's what happens. And the reality is, it is what happened, it is what will happen, because it is what happens. It is the ever-present pattern of the Logos. Leftover civilizations zipping around, I always considered Scripture to be talking of supernatural. There is no such differentiations between supernatural and natural. It's just what we can perceive on the frequency that we're tuned to. Like, your car can pick up certain frequencies, but there's certain frequencies your radio can't pick up. We are like that too. So there is what we call supernatural is just on another level of frequency, and every now and then frequencies get crossed, and you see, someone walk by you that then disappears. I don't think I started thinking about this the other day because I've discussed here before. I grew up like seeing like ghosts around my house, and other people would see them when they were near me too. And it wasn't that they faked it. Like 30-year-old people who were like friends of our families would be sitting in the kitchen, and I would be standing there with them making food. And then we'd both like look over and be expecting somebody to walk by. Like they'd turn a corner, and then you'd wait, and normally somebody would emerge around the corner of this area in my kitchen, and it looked like somebody walked into that area, and we'd be waiting for them to come out, and then they just wouldn't, and then they'd look at me and be like, "Did you see somebody walk by there?" And I'd be like, "Yeah." Like I wasn't gonna say anything, but they would see it, and I used to think it was my house and it was ghosts of dead people. I don't think that it is ghosts of dead people anymore. I had this other theory the other day that basically when you see like a ghost, it's not a ghost of a dead person. It's that there's some level, maybe in or the previous aeon, maybe it's like an echo that's still there, but I don't think that it is like a consciousness of like a person that's just dead that walks around. Like, I don't believe that really is a thing anymore. And I didn't really believe, I was an atheist materialist, but I couldn't deny what I was seeing every now and then. I haven't seen that in, I don't even know, 20 years probably, close to it at this point. But I used to think my house was haunted. My entire family was like, the house is haunted. Maybe it was built on like a graveyard or something. And I don't think that it had anything to do with where the house was. I think it has to do with me being in the house. And there's just some people that are really sensitive to other frequencies. I'm definitely one of them. I'm just realizing this. Like, I have always had problems sleeping in my life from the time I was, can remember. Like 2 years old, I can remember having trouble sleeping. I mean, probably like 3. And I mean that I remember that far back. And I used to have to get in preschool special privilege to not go and to nap time and just go, play with the big kids on the playground. And I think that what it is that during the day, I have a lot of problems focusing on, especially things that I really need to focus on, like this work. And I have to stay up late and do it because I literally think I can like feel or hear the white noise almost. And I can't like hear it with my ears or anything, but it's just causing it to be difficult to focus during the day because I think everybody's thoughts are buzzing around us all the time and we don't really realize it. And also all, the communication that's happening with your devices and everything, even if it's not making sounds with notifications, it's causing changes around you in information. And if you think that we don't pick that up, even if we don't notice that we're picking it up a little bit, I think that's wrong. I think we can pick it up, and some people are more sensitive to it. I'm not saying, oh, that makes you special or anything. It's very annoying, actually. My wife and I got into an argument last night about staying up, and I was like, I wish I could just concentrate on this during the day, but I really have a hard time. But and it's not that she got me noise canceling headphones. It's not noise. It's like meta noise. That's really a good way to put it. I think that that's what ghosts are. They're meta noise, like echoes or something. I don't think that they're like beings that you can talk to or stuff like that. I mean, that doesn't mean that the consciousnesses of dead people, quote unquote dead people, isn't saved. It is, and there probably is some, not even probably, there's almost certainly some type of communication that can sometimes happen there, but it's probably like at God's discretion. I think you lose your ability to make changes in the change space, like the desktop space, which is the space-time space. And that includes for frequencies of life that we don't see. I think demons and angels are just higher frequency beings, like a Wendigo or Skinwalker. Like, that's probably a real thing that's just tuned to a higher frequency that we can't normally see, but sometimes you can. Like, sometimes you can pick up, the radio when you're driving to Phoenix, Arizona from California. And sometimes you can't. It's the same type of thing that's happening. There's only one pattern, and it just happens everywhere, and you just have to realize that. But, for science to start making sense of things like that, we've got a ways to go. But I will just, commend Kirchheim Mungel and even Michael Shermer, Stephen Meyer, and even Brian Keating. There's a new growing movement. Stefan Wolfram, or Stephen Wolfram, I don't know exactly if he says Stephen or Stefan, or Eric Weinstein. All these people who are, scientifically literate people that are operating at a very high level of, the pursuit of truth. Maybe not Michael Shermer, but he has his value. And for them to be discussing this stuff seriously and not just mocking it. Not even Michael Shermer was mocking the ufologists that he had on that much. They were kind of mocking each other a bit, but innocently. And that's good. That's not belittling somebody to the point of them not, basically showcasing that they're not worth your energy or time, and the ideas that they're discussing are not. We have to expand beyond what we call the material world, but we actually don't. That's the reality. We just have to realize that frequency is a structure that occurs in light, in sound, in life, in smell. I have a thing that I click when my dogs are being obnoxious, and it makes like this high-pitched noise, and we can't hear it unless you put it right up to your ear. But they can, and they always look at me if I press it. And that is, they're perceiving something that normally we can't. And that's true of life, I think. There are beings. And Kirchheim Mungel said something about how he thought schizophrenics might be perceiving things, or we should listen to them, and I think something like that. I'll show it tomorrow when I go through the stream with Leogura, because he said it there. But he basically said he thought that it's possible that We should just listen to them, and maybe we'll learn that they're more in touch with reality than we assume. And I think that that's totally true. I think that they're picking up frequencies that we normally cannot. And we're telling them they're crazy for picking it up. And that's probably making them crazy. Which is, I mean, that's a profound revelation if true. Because it changes the entire way in which we would classify, treat, discuss people who suffer from that and that condition, I guess you could say. But it also makes it so that if what they perceive is true, which, by the way, when neuroscientists look at the brain of schizophrenics, when schizophrenics say they are hearing something, the parts of their brain that are activated they are activated just as if they were hearing something that would normally be perceivable to everyone. So it does look, when you look at the brain of these people, when they're having one of these experiences, it looks like they are actually perceiving something that is there. And mathematics, there is no such thing as random nonsense information that isn't really there. So you can't say they're hearing voices that have no basis in real information processing. That doesn't make sense. You have to put input and output. That is part of logic. And you can't have output without input. So there's something causing it. It's not just manifesting randomly and meaninglessly. But think about the implication of if you were, quote unquote, schizophrenic. A friend of mine, his family, he doesn't, but his extended family suffers, and a number of them suffer from schizophrenia. Imagine if what they see is and hear is real. And, people have said, they've labeled me when I went onto, some certain discords where people have less open minds, and I say something, I saw God once when I was thinking about the universe. Like, they labeled me as schizophrenic. And that doesn't, hurt my ego or anything like that, because I would probably think that too if I were in where they are currently, which is where I was in the past. And so I don't blame them for it. But if we realize that mathematically it's impossible for you to perceive things that literally aren't there, then it means that you don't have a disorder. It means you have a power. So schizophrenics who see things and hear things, they probably have an ability that's literally like a superpower. They have like super hearing and super sight. When Will Witt from PragerU and I would go and film the Man on the Street videos, we would meet a lot of schizophrenics downtown, and because they were homeless. And they're probably homeless and dysfunctional because we've told them that they're crazy and it's driven them crazy. If everybody tells you you're crazy and you start believing them, but you still perceive things that they're telling you don't actually exist, you literally have no choice but to become crazy. You will become crazy. And your world falls apart. But Will once turned to me and he said, how come everyone we meet is like a combination of a crazy person and a prophet? Or a schizophrenic and a prophet, or something like that. And they were all like that. They were saying things we didn't understand, and then all of a sudden there'd be this like statement of profound wisdom. And it occurred again and again and again. And you would expect that from basically people suffering from seeing more than the average person, but being told that it's fake. It's like, maybe schizophrenics don't have to be, ending up homeless in LA. This is why science needs to expand. There's literally people's entire lives depending on it, just cognitively. I would consider anything left over from ancient civilizations to be natural, not supernatural. I don't believe there's a distinction between natural and supernatural at all. The only distinction that could possibly exist between natural and supernatural would be God versus creation. And nothing else. There is no real supernatural. I think that what we call supernatural is just a way of saying nonsense, but nicely. It's like saying magic. Somebody says, that's magic. What they're really saying is that's fake, because we assume magic doesn't exist. But Robert Grant, I've said it before, he says it a lot. Either everything is magic or nothing is magic. That's true. And same with science. Either everything is science or nothing is science. Everything is religion or nothing is religion. Certain words are really confusing us. And one of them is natural and supernatural. They are basically the same thing as science versus religion. Supernatural is religion, natural is science. And all of these terms are so confusing. There's just the seeking of truth, and you do that through observation, experimentation, logical deduction, channeling, your artistic inspiration. Like, there's so many different ways to pursue truth, but there's just the pursuit of truth. It's not that this is science and this is religion and this is natural and this is supernatural. These terms are bad words, I think. But gotta go. Sleep well, everyone. God bless. God bless, Chris. Thanks for joining. And I don't mean to, I wasn't meaning to attack your perspective or anything. Just giving mine. But this is complicated, so I appreciate your thoughts always. You might be right. I don't know where the line is. If these beings can travel via the heavens, which I really think they can, and I mean the heavens, the real heavens, like the quantum entanglement structure that is the substructure of reality, the scaffolding. I think that's how you travel via warp, essentially. That is literally traveling through the heavens. That doesn't mean you get to stay there if you're still alive in you're in the change state that we are currently in, what we call alive. Dead is the save state. It's like when you close a file on your computer versus when you have it open and you're messing with it and moving it, changing it. But when you save it and you close it, you just killed the file, essentially. But the file isn't a sentient being, but it's a good metaphor. It's very close. So, there was... what time is it? I think that's what I'm going to end it on. I do want to talk next week a bit about the relationship. Basically, I found the pattern of the 4 primary perspectives, the 6 fundamental perspectives, the 9 dimensional quantum of consciousness. I found all these structures in human interactions, basically. So there's 4 primary relationships, which is everyone is it's child, parent, spouse, and sibling. These are the 4 primary relationships that constitute family. And so then it expands from there, and I've been mapping it. I'll show it next week, but I do want to keep this short, so I'm going to not get into it today. But I appreciate everybody on here just for random riffing and, showing some things that have been on my mind. We are going to go through all of this tomorrow to discuss Leogura's stream, which is 7 hours. I do recommend listening to it at some point, but probably break it up. But it is very interesting. But we're going to go through a lot, so you'll get 3 hours of it tomorrow. So with that, peace everyone. God bless. I will see you tomorrow.